I am Isabel, 38 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, and a survivor of sniper fire in Afghanistan. But my deadliest enemy doesn't hold a rifle. She is sitting across from me at the Thanksgiving table, wearing a string of pearls and smiling as I knock over a glass of wine. My right arm jerks uncontrollably, a permanent souvenir from saving my squad. Instead of helping, my sister-in-law, Karen, screams into the silenced dining room, "God, are you drunk at noon again? Aren't you ashamed to wear that uniform?" My parents look down. My brother stays silent. They think I will bow my head, apologize, and run to the bathroom to cry like I always do. But today, I decided to roll up my sleeves, and the truth beneath that fabric will wipe that smile off her face forever. Tell me where you are watching from and hit subscribe if you have ever had a relative turn your most painful weakness into a joke to humiliate you. The drive from the base to my parents' house in Northern Virginia usually takes 40 minutes, but with holiday traffic clogging the Beltway, it took over an hour. That was an hour too long for my right arm. The dull, grinding ache in my radial nerve had started around mile marker 12. By the time I turned into the manicured subdivision of McLean, my hand felt like it was encased in concrete. I parked my modest sedan behind a gleaming white Lexus SUV in the driveway. Karen's car. Of course. It sat there like a territorial marker, blocking me in. I turned off the ignition and sat in the silence for a moment, gripping the steering wheel with my good left hand. I looked down at my right hand, resting limp on my thigh in its camouflage fatigue. Radial nerve palsy. That's what the doctors called it. I called it the anchor that kept dragging me back to the sand outside Kandahar. A verse from Sunday school drifted through my mind, unbidden. 2 Corinthians 12:9. My power is made perfect in weakness. I let out a dry, bitter chuckle that sounded too loud in the empty car. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel perfect. I just felt tired. I felt like a soldier who had survived a war only to come home to a battlefield where I didn't know the rules. I took a deep breath, steeling myself not for combat, but for hors d'oeuvres and polite conversation. I walked through the front door, and the smell hit me instantly. Roast turkey, sage stuffing, and the cloying scent of expensive vanilla candles. It was the smell of a perfect American Thanksgiving. "Isabel, you made it." Karen was in the kitchen, standing guard over the oven. She looked like she had stepped out of a catalog for suburban perfection. Cashmere sweater, a string of pearls that probably cost more than my first car, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi, Karen," I said, trying to keep my right hand tucked unobtrusively into my pocket. "Where's Mom and Dad?" "In the den with Daniel, watching the game," she said, wiping her hands on a pristine tea towel. Her eyes scanned me, lingering on my uniform. "Oh, you didn't have time to change? That's a shame. We dressed up." "Shift ran late," I lied. I hadn't wanted to struggle with buttons and zippers alone in the locker room. "The Pentagon doesn't close for holidays." Karen sighed, a sound that managed to convey both pity and judgment. "You work so hard, Izzy. I don't know how you do it, but then again." She turned back to the gravy, stirring it rhythmically. "It must be nice, in a way. Living that bachelor life. You don't have to worry about a mortgage, or getting kids into private schools, or keeping a house running. You just follow orders." The dig was precise, like a surgical incision. You have no life. You have no family. You are incomplete. "I handle plenty of responsibilities, Karen," I said quietly. I know, she waved a hand dismissively. "But it's not the same as managing a household, is it? Daniel is so stressed about the renovation costs. But I told him, you have to spend money to maintain standards." I bit my tongue. The renovation I paid for, I wanted to scream. The $20,000 I had wired to Daniel 6 months ago because he was crying about black mold. Money earned through blood and hazard pay. But I said nothing. I just walked past her, my heavy boots thumping awkwardly on the hardwood floor. 20 minutes later, we were seated. The dining room was suffocatingly warm. My mother had set the table with her best white linen tablecloth, the one she hand-washed and ironed for days. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Let's say grace, my father said. We bowed our heads. I peeked at Daniel across the table. He looked tired, his hairline receding, his eyes avoiding mine. He was my little brother, the one I used to defend from bullies on the playground. Now, he wouldn't even look at me because he knew his wife was picking me apart. Amen, the table chorused. Pass the wine, please, Karen said, holding out her glass. The Cabernet. It pairs with a dark meat. The bottle was sitting directly in front of me. My brain sent the command, lift the bottle. Pass it to the right. It was a simple motion, a motion I'd performed 1,000 times before the injury. I reached out. My fingers wrapped around the neck of the heavy glass bottle. I felt the cool glass. I had it. And then, the short circuit happened. A violent spasm shot from my elbow to my wrist. It wasn't a tremble, it was a convulsion. My grip simply vanished. My fingers splayed open against my will. The bottle didn't just fall, it launched. It hit the rim of my water goblet with a deafening clink, shattered and toppled over. Time froze. I watched, horrified, as the dark, blood-red liquid gushed out of the broken bottle. It surged across the pristine, snow-white linen tablecloth. It soaked into the fabric instantly, spreading like an arterial wound, creeping toward the turkey, toward Karen's pearls, toward my lap. The silence in the room was absolute. For 3 seconds, the only sound was the drip, drip, drip of wine hitting the rug. Then Karen stood up so abruptly, her chair screeched against the floor. Jesus Christ, Isabel! Her voice wasn't worried, it wasn't helpful, it was shrill and vibrating with disgust. I'm sorry, I stammered, clutching my twitching right arm with my left hand, trying to calm the spasm. My hand, Your hand? Karen laughed, a cruel, sharp bark. She pointed a manicured finger at me. Stop it, just stop it, look at you. She swept her arm toward the mess. This is the second time this month you've dropped something. You're glassy-eyed, you're slurring your words. I am not. Are you drunk? She shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. My God, Isabel, it's noon. Are you drunk at noon again? Karen, stop, Daniel whispered, but he didn't stand up. He didn't move. No, I won't stop, Daniel. Karen turned on him, then back to me. Her eyes were wide, feigning concern but gleaming with malice. We all know you're struggling, Isabel. But to show up here, in front of your parents, wearing that uniform you're supposed to respect, and getting wasted? It's pathetic. Aren't you ashamed? I looked at my father. He was staring at his plate, pushing peas around with a fork. I looked at my mother. She was blotting the tablecloth with a napkin, looking like she wanted to cry because of the linen, not because her daughter was being gutted. I sat there, frozen. The smell of the wine was overpowering now, sharp and acidic. It smelled like the fermentation of grapes, but to me, in that moment, looking at the spreading red stain on the white cloth, it smelled like iron. It looked like the sand in Kandahar. My arm gave one last, violent twitch, as if agreeing with the memory. I was a lieutenant colonel. I commanded respect from hundreds of airmen. I had faced enemy fire. But sitting there, watching the red liquid seep into the fibers of the cloth, I felt completely naked. I wasn't a soldier. I was just an inconvenience, a stain on their perfect holiday. And nobody was going to save me. The spreading stain of Cabernet on the white linen didn't look like wine to me anymore. As I stared at the dark red pool creeping toward the crystal salt shakers, the dining room in Virginia dissolved. The smell of roasted turkey was replaced by the acrid stench of burning diesel and copper. Suddenly, I wasn't sitting in a climate-controlled suburban house. I was back in the heat of Kandahar. It was 3 years ago. We were on a routine patrol when the ambush hit. The first RPG struck the lead Humvee, flipping it like a toy. Chaos erupted. Dust, shouting, the terrifying crack thump of incoming fire. Man down! Man down! I saw Sergeant Marquez dragging himself across the exposed road, his leg a mess of torn uniform and blood. I didn't think. Training took over. I sprinted from cover, grabbing his vest to haul him toward the shelter of a concrete barrier. I got you, Marquez! Move! I screamed over the roar of the machine gun. That's when it happened. A single, sharp punch to my right arm. It didn't hurt at first. It just felt like someone had hit me with a sledgehammer. Then came the heat. I looked down. My sleeve was shredded. Blood, bright arterial red, just like the wine on the table, was pulsing out in rhythm with my heartbeat, soaking the desert sand. The sniper's 7.62mm round had torn through my bicep, severing the radial nerve instantly. My hand went dead. It just flopped there, useless, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I didn't scream. I just stared at it, thinking, I need that hand. How am I going to sign paperwork? How am I going to salute? The pain that followed was white-hot, blinding. But the fear was colder. It was the fear of being broken, of being less than. Isabel, hello? Karen's sharp voice snapped me back to the present. The sand vanished. The blood turned back into wine. I blinked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Are you even listening? Karen huffed, crossing her arms. I asked if you were going to clean this up, or if you expected the maid to do it on Monday. I looked at her, really looked at her. It was hard to reconcile this woman with the girl Daniel had married 10 years ago. Back then, Karen was a second-grade teacher who shopped at Target and laughed at Daniel's bad jokes. She was sweet, but Northern Virginia had changed her. Or maybe it just revealed who she always wanted to be. The transformation started when they moved into this neighborhood. It was subtle at first, a leased BMW instead of the Honda. Then came the obsession with the right preschool. Then the country club membership that cost more than an E4's annual salary. To Karen, my military career wasn't service. It was blue-collar. It was dirty work. In her world of lawyers, lobbyists, and defense contractors who never left their air-conditioned offices, actually wearing the uniform and getting dirt under your fingernails was something lower class. I'll get a towel, I said, my voice hoarse. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. As I walked to the kitchen, I passed the granite island, a massive slab of imported stone that shimmered under the recessed lighting. I ran my good hand along the cold edge. This island, this kitchen. 6 months ago, Daniel had called me, panic in his voice. Izzy, we have a problem. The inspection found mold in the walls. We have to tear it all out. It's going to cost 20 grand. We don't have the liquidity right now. I didn't hesitate. I had savings. It was money I had hoarded during 2 deployments, hazard pay earned while sleeping in tents and dodging mortars. I'll wire it tomorrow, I had told him. Just pay me back when you can. Take care of the house. I wired $20,000 the next morning. 2 months later, I came over for dinner and saw this kitchen. The walls hadn't just been fixed, they had been knocked down to create an open concept. The appliances were professional-grade Viking ranges. The countertops were this obscene, sparkling granite. Do you like it? Karen had beamed, showing it off. It really elevates the home's value. She never mentioned the mold. She never mentioned paying me back. She just assumed that my money, my combat pay, was her renovation fund. To her, I was just a resource to be mined. A single woman with disposable income and no real family to spend it on. I grabbed a roll of paper towels, my grip tightening until the cardboard tube buckled. Why did I let them do this? Why did I keep giving? I looked over at Daniel in the dining room. He was whispering furiously to Karen now, probably trying to de-escalate her, but not daring to defend me. She's drunk, Daniel, I heard Karen hiss. Look at her eyes. She's unstable. I don't want her around the kids if she's going to be twitching and dropping things. She's not drunk, Karen. It's her nerve damage, Daniel murmured, his voice weak. Then she should get surgery, or therapy, or something. It's embarrassing. Daniel sighed. He looked defeated. I remembered a conversation we'd had last Christmas, out on the porch. I'm sorry she's so hard on you, Izzy, he had said, nursing a beer. She's just under a lot of pressure. The other moms at the club, they're vicious. If you don't have the right vacation photos, the right clothes, she feels like she's drowning. Just let her have her moments, okay? For me? For me. That was always the plea. Be the bigger person, Isabel. Take the hit, Isabel. You're strong, she's fragile. But I looked at my brother now, watching his wife berate his sister, and I realized he wasn't protecting peace. He was protecting his own comfort. He was an enabler. He would rather watch me bleed out emotionally than face the discomfort of standing up to his wife. I walked back into the dining room with the paper towels. I didn't look at Karen. I knelt down on the expensive Persian rug, another purchase that probably came from my bank account, and started blotting the wine. My right hand trembled violently as I pressed the paper into the carpet. It wasn't just the nerve damage this time, it was rage. It was the realization that while I was fighting for my life in a desert, Karen was fighting for social status in a suburb. And somehow, in this house, her battle was considered more important. Her stress over a dinner party was treated with more reverence than my physical trauma. "You're making it worse," Karen snapped, looking down at me. "You're rubbing it in. You have to dab." I stopped. I looked up at her from the floor. For the first time in years, I didn't see my sister-in-law. I saw an enemy combatant. Not one with a gun, but one with a weapon far more insidious: entitlement. She didn't hate me because I was drunk. She hated me because my existence, my scars, my uniform, my single life, challenged her perfect, shallow narrative. She hated me because she owed me, and people like Karen hate being indebted to someone they consider beneath them. If you have ever felt like the family ATM or the emotional punching bag for ungrateful relatives, please hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, have you ever sacrificed for someone who later treated your kindness as a weakness? Type yes if you know exactly how this feels. I stood up, leaving the sodden, red-stained paper towels on the floor. "I'm not drunk, Karen," I said, my voice low and steady, contrasting the shaking of my hand. "And I'm done cleaning up your messes." Karen blinked, surprised by the tone. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." I turned to Daniel. "We need to talk about the $20,000. Now." The air in the room didn't just get heavy, it solidified. 05 a.m. The alarm on my iPhone blared, cutting through the silence of my Arlington apartment. I didn't hit snooze. Soldiers don't hit snooze. I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. My right arm felt heavy, like a dead weight attached to my shoulder. It was stiff in the mornings, the scar tissue tight and unforgiving. The shower was easy enough. Brushing my teeth with my left hand was a skill I had mastered 3 years ago. But the uniform was always a battle. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, staring at my service dress coat. It hung there, crisp, blue, and adorned with ribbons that told the story of my career. But right now, all I cared about were the buttons. Button 1. My left fingers fumbled with the fabric. Button 2. Okay. Button 3. I needed my right hand to hold the fabric taut. I tried to lift it. The signal went from my brain to my bicep, but it got lost somewhere in the ravaged nerves. My hand twitched, fingers curling into a useless claw. "Come on," I whispered, grit in my voice. "Work. Just work." I spent 10 minutes on a task that should have taken 30 seconds. By the time the last button was secured, I was sweating. My forehead was damp, not from heat, but from the sheer, humiliating exertion of dressing myself. I looked perfect on the outside, sharp, professional, commanding. But inside, I felt like a toddler learning to tie her shoes. I grabbed my keys and headed out into the pre-dawn darkness. The commute on I-395 was its usual parking lot. Red taillights stretched as far as the eye could see. I turned on the radio, tuning into a podcast I had downloaded the night before. Brené Brown's voice filled the cabin of my sedan. Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. I gripped the steering wheel with my left hand. Courage to be seen. Was that what I was doing? Or was I hiding? At the Pentagon, hiding was the name of the game. I parked in the massive north lot and walked the long corridors to my office in the E-Ring. The building hummed with power. Generals, admirals, and high-level civilians moved with purpose. Here, weakness was not an option. You were either mission-capable or You are out. I had a briefing at R90 with a 2-star general regarding logistics for the Pacific Theater. I walked into the conference room, my folder tucked firmly under my left arm. Colonel Barry, the general nodded. Good to see you. Let's hear the update. I stood at the head of the table. I didn't use a laser pointer. My right hand wasn't steady enough. I used the clicker with my left. Sir, as you can see on slide 4, supply chain disruptions are projected to decrease by 15%, I said, my voice steady, projecting authority. But under the mahogany table, my right hand was having a seizure. The stress of the presentation, the adrenaline, it all triggered the palsy. My hand was vibrating against my thigh. I clamped my elbow against my ribs, hard, trying to physically crush the tremor into submission. Don't look down. Don't let them see. If they see you shaking, they'll think you're nervous. Or worse, broken. The general narrowed his eyes, looking at me. For a terrifying second, I thought he saw it. I thought he was going to ask, Colonel, are you fit for duty? Good work, Barry, he said instead. Dismissed. I walked out of the room, my back straight. I made it to the nearest women's restroom, locked myself in a stall, and leaned my forehead against the cool metal door. I was shaking all over now. It was exhausting. It was a performance that never ended. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping for an email from my team. It was a text from Karen. I know you're probably angry, Izzy. But Daniel and I talked. We're really worried about your drinking. I found a great outpatient rehab center in Alexandria. It's discreet. I already sent them your info. Please do this for us. Don't embarrass Mom and Dad anymore. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't apologizing for the money. She wasn't apologizing for the scene at Thanksgiving. She was doubling down. She was rewriting reality. In Karen's version of the world, she wasn't a thief who stole my combat pay for granite countertops. She was a concerned saint trying to save her alcoholic sister-in-law. It was classic gaslighting. And the worst part? It worked. For a split second, I questioned myself. Did I drink too much? I had a glass of wine with dinner occasionally. Was that too much? Was my hand shaking because of the nerve damage, or was my body failing me in other ways? No, this was the injury. I knew that. The doctors knew that. But Karen didn't care about the truth. She cared about the narrative. If I was the sick one, then she didn't have to be the guilty one. I didn't reply. I couldn't. If I typed what I wanted to say, I would regret it. I left work late, grabbing Thai takeout on the way home. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No kids running around. No husband asking about my day. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of the evening news on the TV. I sat on my beige sofa, eating pad thai out of the carton with a plastic fork. My right hand rested on a heating pad, the heat soaking into the stiff muscles. I looked around my living room. It was clean. It was orderly. There were framed photos of my deployments, flags, coins, but it felt cold. It must be nice, Karen had said. Living that bachelor life. Was it nice? I walked into the bathroom to wash my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The fluorescent light was unforgiving. It showed the fine lines around my eyes, the gray hairs I kept dyeing blonde. I looked at my reflection. Who are you? I whispered. I was a lieutenant colonel. I was a donor to my brother's lifestyle. I was a disappointment to my sister-in-law. But was I a failure? Maybe Karen was right. Maybe I was just a broken piece of machinery that didn't fit into the suburban puzzle anymore. Maybe I was destined to be this, capable but alone, respected but unloved. The silence of the apartment seemed to press in on me, suffocating. I needed to hear a voice that didn't judge me. I needed to be somewhere where a shaking hand wasn't a liability, but a badge of honor. But where? Who would understand this? Who would understand that the strongest part of me was the part that was broken? I turned off the light, leaving myself in darkness. The Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda is a place of contradictions. It smells of antiseptic and floor wax, but the air is thick with something else, resilience. I was there for my bi-weekly physical therapy session, but first I had a meeting I couldn't skip. Colonel Avery Butcher was waiting for me in the cafeteria. Colonel Butcher was a legend in the Air Force. 60 years old, silver hair cut in a sharp bob, and eyes that could spot a uniform infraction from 100 yards. She had been my mentor since I was a second lieutenant. I spotted her at a corner table, nursing a black coffee. "Colonel," I said, snapping a salute with my left hand before realizing we were in civilian clothes. Old habits. "Sit down, Izzy," she smiled, the expression softening her angular face. "And stop calling me Colonel. We're off duty." I sat, placing my own cup of coffee on the table. My right hand gave a traitorous twitch, and a splash of hot liquid sloshed over the rim, staining the paper napkin. I froze. Instinctively, I pulled my hand back, hiding it under the table, my face burning. I waited for the look. The Karen look. The pity. The disgust. But Avery just watched me over the rim of her cup. "Don't do that," she said quietly. "Do what, ma'am?" "Don't hide it, not from me." She put her cup down. "I saw the report from your neurologist. Radial nerve palsy, permanent damage." I looked down at my lap. "I'm managing it. I'm still mission capable." "I know you are," she said firmly. "But you're treating that tremor like it's a character flaw. Like it's something you have to apologize for." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to that steel core tone she used before a mission briefing. "That shake isn't a weakness, Isabel. It's the receipt. It's the price of leadership. You paid that cost so your people didn't have to. Never hide the receipt." I felt a lump form in my throat. The price of leadership. For 3 years, Karen had made me feel like my injury was a clumsy habit, like spilling wine at a party. Avery just reframed it as a badge of honor. "Thank you, Avery," I whispered. "Don't thank me. Just own it." She checked her watch. "Now, go to PT. Don't make me write you up for malingering." I left the cafeteria feeling lighter than I had in months. The corridors of Walter Reed were busy. Doctors in white coats, Marines in wheelchairs, families pushing strollers. As I headed toward the elevator, a voice boomed across the hallway. Commander Barry." I turned. Hobbling toward me as fast as his crutches would allow was a man I hadn't seen in 3 years. He was missing his left leg below the knee, the metal pylon of his prosthetic glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Sergeant Marquez," I gasped. "It is you!" He grinned, his face breaking into a wide, genuine smile that erased the lines of pain around his eyes. "I told you, Leo. I told you she was real." Trailing behind him was a little boy, maybe 7 years old, holding a toy airplane. He looked from his father to me with wide, dark eyes. "Sergeant," I said, stepping forward to grasp his hand. But before I could, he dropped one crutch and enveloped me in a bear hug. It was awkward, unbalanced, and smelled of Old Spice and sweat, and it was the best hug I had received in a decade. "Look at you," he said, pulling back, his hands gripping my shoulders. "You look good, ma'am." "I look like a desk jockey," I laughed, blinking back tears. "You're the one looking good. How's the leg?" "Takes some getting used to." He tapped the metal shin with his crutch. "But I'm walking. I'm alive." He turned to the little boy. "Leo, come here." The boy stepped forward shyly, clutching his toy. Marquez shifted his weight, wincing slightly as he lowered himself onto his good knee, bringing himself to eye level with his son. He pointed at me. "Leo, you remember the story I told you about the angel in the desert?" The boy nodded solemnly. "This is her," Marquez said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Barry. She's the reason Daddy came home." He looked up at me, then gently took my right hand, the shaking one, the ugly one, and held it out for his son to see. My hand trembled in his grip, but he didn't let go. "See her hand, Leo," Marquez said softly. "See how it shakes?" The boy nodded, his eyes fixated on my twitching fingers. "That's not because she's scared," Marquez said. "It shakes because she took the pain for me. She caught the bad thing that was meant for Daddy, so I could come back and teach you how to play baseball. That shaking, that's what a hero looks like." Leo looked up at me. There was no judgment in his eyes. No, why are you drunk at noon? No, you're embarrassing the family. There was only awe. Thank you for saving my daddy, Leo whispered. Then he did something that broke me. He reached out and touched my shaking hand with his small, warm fingers. He patted it like he was soothing a hurt animal. I couldn't breathe. The air in the hallway felt crystalline. In that moment, the image of Karen sneering at me over the Thanksgiving turkey dissolved. The memory of Daniel looking away in shame evaporated. I looked at Marquez, a man who had lost a leg and still smiled. I looked at Avery, a woman who demanded I own my scars. I looked at Leo, a child who understood sacrifice better than my own adult brother. This was it. This was my tribe. These people, strangers, subordinates, mentors, they saw me. They didn't see a single childless woman with a disability. They saw Isabel Berry. They saw the soldier. They saw the sacrifice. I realized then that I had been seeking validation from the wrong source. I had been begging for water from a dry well. Karen and Daniel would never understand this. They couldn't. Their world was too small, bounded by granite countertops and social ladders. My world was here, in the blood and the bond and the survival. I squeezed Leo's hand gently with my trembling fingers. You're welcome, Leo, I choked out. Your daddy is a brave man. So are you, Marquez said, standing up. Don't you ever forget that, ma'am. I walked away from them 10 minutes later, heading toward the parking garage. My hand was still shaking. The nerve damage hadn't magically healed. But for the first time in a long time, as I walked out into the bright Maryland sunshine, I didn't put my hand in my pocket. I let it swing by my side. I let it shake. Let the world see it. I had paid for it. It was mine. 2 weeks after my breakthrough with Colonel Butcher and Sergeant Marquez, my phone rang. It was Daniel. Hey, Izzy, he said, his voice carrying that familiar, hesitant tone he used when he wanted something. What is it, Daniel? I asked, putting my phone on speaker while I sorted laundry with my left hand. It's Dad's 70th birthday next Saturday. We're throwing him a big party at the country club. Catered, open bar, the works. All his old golf buddies will be there. I paused. Daniel, you know how things are with Karen right now. I know, he rushed to say. But listen, we talked. She promised to be on her best behavior. Seriously, she knows she crossed a line at Thanksgiving. She just wants everything to be perfect for Dad. Please, Izzy, it's a milestone. If you're not there, it'll break Dad's heart. Do it for Dad. The ultimate guilt trip. I sighed, looking at my trembling right hand resting on the folding table. I felt stronger now, thanks to Marquez. I had armor. Fine, I said. I'll be there. But one strike, Daniel, one comment, and I'm gone. Deal. Thank you, Izzy. Really. I arrived at the country club on Saturday evening, wearing a navy blue cocktail dress. It was sleeveless, exposing the scar on my right arm. For the first time, I didn't try to cover it with a shawl or a cardigan. Let them see. The ballroom was impressive. Crystal chandeliers, live jazz band, waiters circulating with trays of hors d'oeuvres. My parents were holding court near the entrance. Dad looked frail but happy in his tuxedo. Isabel, Dad beamed, hugging me carefully. You look wonderful, honey. Happy birthday, Dad, I smiled. For the first hour, everything was fine. I stuck to sparkling water with a lime twist. I made polite conversation with my parents' friends, answering questions about the Pentagon with practiced vague answers. Karen was circulating the room like a shark in a sequined dress. She clocked me immediately, her eyes narrowing at my exposed scar, but she kept her distance. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe we could get through this. Then, the ambush happened. I was standing near the shrimp cocktail station when Karen approached. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a tall, bespectacled man in a sharp gray suit. Isabel, Karen called out, her voice pitched just a little too loud, ensuring the cluster of guests nearby would turn their heads. I'm so glad you could make it. You look stable. I stiffened. Hello, Karen. She turned to the man beside her. Isabel, I want you to meet Dr. Aris. He's a very dear friend from the club, and he runs the Serenity Ridge Center in Loudoun County. I knew that name. Serenity Ridge was a high-end addiction recovery facility, the kind where celebrities went to dry out. Dr. Aris, Karen continued, placing a hand on my left shoulder, the good one, in a gesture that felt less like affection and more like restraint. This is my sister-in-law, Isabel. We were discussing her situation the other day. Dr. Aris looked uncomfortable. He adjusted his glasses. Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Barry. It's Lieutenant Colonel, I corrected him, my voice cool. Right, Karen interrupted with a tight, sympathetic smile. Anyway, Dr. Aris, Isabel has been going through a very difficult time since she came back. The shaking, the mood swings. We're all just so worried about her coping mechanisms. The conversation in our immediate circle died. People were listening. I could feel their eyes, curious, judging, boring into me. Karen, I said, keeping my voice low. This is not the place. Oh, stop being so defensive, Izzy, she sighed, playing the role of the long-suffering martyr perfectly. We're family. We just want you to get help. Dr. Aris said he has a bed opening up next week, and I told him. You told him what? I asked, my heart pounding. That we would cover the cost, she said, loud enough for my father's golf partner to hear. We know you can't afford that kind of care on a government salary, and we don't want you spiraling any further. It was a masterclass in public humiliation. Under the guise of generosity, we'll pay, and concern, we're worried. She was painting me as a charity case and a drunk, right in front of the people my parents respected most. I looked around the room, frantic. Where was Daniel? I spotted him by the bar, 10 feet away. He was watching us. He heard every word. He saw Karen cornering me with an addiction specialist at his father's birthday party. Our eyes locked. Help me, I pleaded silently. Tell them the truth. Tell them I gave you $20,000. Tell them my hand shakes because of a sniper bullet, not a bottle of vodka. Daniel held my gaze for 1 second. 2 seconds. Then he looked down at his glass of scotch. He swirled the ice cubes. And he turned his back. He turned his back on me. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet final sound of a bridge collapsing. The brother I had protected on the playground, the brother I'd bailed out financially, the brother I'd loved. He was gone. In his place was a coward who would sell out his own blood to keep his wife happy. I looked back at Karen. She was smiling at me, a triumphant glint in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought I would crumble, cry, or run away in shame, like I usually did. She thought she had shamed me into submission. She was wrong. I looked down at the glass of sparkling water in my right hand. My arm was trembling violently now. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. Tink, tink, tink. A frantic rhythm. But this time, the shaking wasn't fear. It wasn't weakness. It was fury. It was the cold, concentrated rage of a soldier who realizes the rules of engagement have changed. I wasn't at a family party anymore. I was in a hostile zone. And in a hostile zone, you don't retreat. You return fire. I didn't say a word. I just tightened my grip on the glass until my knuckles turned white. The water sloshed over the rim, wetting my fingers, but I didn't drop it. Karen's smile faltered slightly as she saw the look in my eyes. The concern on her face slipped, revealing the uncertainty underneath. She expected tears. Instead, she was looking at a predator. You think I need help, Karen? I asked, my voice deadly calm, carrying over the soft jazz music. Well, yes, obviously, she stammered, glancing at Dr. Aris for support. Dr. Aris, I said, turning to the doctor, ignoring Karen completely. I hope you're good at crisis management, because you're about to witness one. I took a step forward. My hand was still shaking, but my resolve was granite. The time for silence was over. The jazz band was playing a soft rendition of Fly Me to the Moon, but all I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. Karen stood there, smugness radiating off her like heat, waiting for Dr. Aris to take me away, waiting for me to crumble. Daniel was still studying the ice in his scotch glass. his back turned to the sister who had paid for the roof over his head. I looked at the water glass in my hand. It was vibrating so hard the liquid was misting over the rim. My power is made perfect in weakness. Suddenly, I understood the verse. It wasn't about being passive. It wasn't about enduring. It was about using the broken parts of yourself as a weapon when you have nothing left to lose. I walked past Dr. Eris. I walked past Karen. I walked straight to the nearest high-top cocktail table, where a group of my father's golf buddies were watching the scene unfold. Slam! I brought the heavy glass down on the table with enough force to threaten the crystal. The sound was like a gunshot in the polite murmur of the ballroom. Silence. Instant, absolute silence. The band stopped playing. A waiter dropped a spoon. Every head in the room, 50, maybe 60 people, turned toward me. You want to talk about my difficulties, Karen? I asked. My voice wasn't shouting, but it projected perfectly to the back of the room. It was my command voice, the voice that cut through wind and rotor wash. You want to discuss my situation in front of Dr. Eris and half of Northern Virginia? Let's do it. Karen blinked, her smile faltering. Isabel, please, you're making a scene. You're drunk. Stop, I said. It was a command, not a request. I reached across with my left hand to my right shoulder. The fabric of my cocktail dress was silk, expensive. I didn't care. I grabbed the sleeve and yanked it up. It bunched, resisting, but I pulled harder, rolling it all the way up to my shoulder, exposing the entirety of my upper arm. The gasps were audible. Under the soft chandelier light, my arm looked brutal. The scar was a deep, jagged crater where the muscle used to be. The flesh around it was withered, the bicep atrophied and twisted. It was purple, white, and angry. It was the kind of wound you only see in trauma centers or war zones, not at country club birthday parties. Look at it, I demanded, sweeping my gaze across the room. I held my arm out. It was shaking violently, spastic, and uncontrollable. This isn't alcohol, I said, pointing to the tremor. This is what happens when a 7.62mm sniper round tears through your arm at 2,000 feet per second. I turned to Dr. Eris. The man looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Doctor, you're a medical professional. Does this look like the tremor of an alcoholic to you? Or does it look like radial nerve palsy caused by catastrophic trauma? It appears to be neurological trauma, Dr. Eris stammered, adjusting his glasses, stepping away from Karen. I turned my sights back to Karen. She'd gone pale, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. It happened 3 years ago in Kandahar, I said, my voice shaking with emotion now. I was dragging a man to safety. I took the bullet meant for him. That's why my hand shakes, Karen. Because the nerve is dead, not because I'm drunk at noon. I didn't know, Karen whispered, her eyes wide. You didn't know. I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. How could you not know? Did you ever ask? In 3 years, did you ever once ask me what happened over there? Or were you too busy judging me for not fitting into your picture-perfect life? Isabel, that's enough. Daniel finally spoke up, turning around. He looked terrified. We can talk about this privately. Privately? I wheeled on him. Like how you privately took my $20,000. A murmur ripped through the crowd. $20,000? That's right, I said, addressing the room again. 6 months ago, my brother told me he needed money for mold remediation. He cried poor. So I wired him $20,000 of my combat pay, hazard pay, money I earned getting shot at. I pointed a shaking finger at Karen. And what did you do with it? Did you fix the mold? No, you bought Viking appliances. You bought granite countertops. You bought those pearls. Karen recoiled as if I had slapped her. You took my blood money and used it to renovate your kitchen, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. And then you had the audacity, the sheer, unadulterated gall, to stand here and tell everyone I'm a charity case who needs rehab. My father stepped forward, his face gray. Daniel, is this true? Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Karen. She looked at the floor. His silence was the only answer anyone needed. I am a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, I said, pulling my sleeve down, covering the scar. I have led hundreds of airmen. I have saved lives. I have value. I looked Karen dead in the eye. I don't need your rehab, Karen. I don't need your pity, and I certainly don't need your family. I grabbed my purse from the table. Happy birthday, Dad, I said to my father, my voice softening for just a second. I'm sorry I ruined your party, but I couldn't let them ruin my life anymore. I turned and walked toward the double doors. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. Nobody said a word. Nobody tried to stop me. As I pushed through the doors into the cool night air, I felt my hand shaking. But for the first time in years, my heart was steady. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself against toxic family members who try to destroy your reputation, hit that like button right now. And in the comments, I want you to type, I am strong, if you believe that the truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how much it shakes you. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the country club and the lies behind me in the rearview mirror. The morning after the birthday party, I woke up to a digital siege. My phone, which I had silenced before driving home, had become a graveyard of missed calls and desperate notifications. 47 missed calls, 32 text messages. I sat up in bed, poured a cup of coffee with my shaking right hand, steadying it with my left, and began to scroll through the wreckage. Most were from Daniel. Izzy, pick up. You're being insane. You ruined Dad's 70th. Do you have any idea how embarrassed Karen is? You need to call and apologize. People are talking. You completely overreacted. Just pick up the phone. Then there were the messages from Mom. They were softer, but in a way, more insidious. Isabel, please come home. We can fix this. We're a family. Families fight, but we don't leave. Don't be like this, honey. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. The mantra of every family that wants to keep their dysfunction comfortable. Being the bigger person usually just means being the one willing to get flattened so everyone else can walk all over you. I put the phone down. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel the familiar urge to rush over there and smooth things over. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly cold. It was a military kind of cold. The kind you feel when you're planning a strategic strike. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't call. I didn't text. I opened a new email draft. In the military, we use a format called BLUF, bottom line up front. No fluff, no emotions. Just the mission objective. 2. Daniel Barry, Karen Barry, Robert Barry, Susan Barry. Subject. Terms of engagement. Family, last night was not an episode. It was a correction of the record. Effective immediately, I am ceasing all communication with Daniel and Karen. Do not call me, do not text me, do not show up at my apartment. I will only consider re-engaging if 2 conditions are met. 1. Karen will admit, in writing and to the guests present last night, that she fabricated the story about my alcoholism to mask her own insecurities. No excuses, no spin. 2. Daniel will present a payment plan for the $20,000 loan I provided for mold remediation, which was misappropriated for luxury renovations. If a plan is not received within 30 days, I will file a suit in small claims court. This is not a negotiation. Letitern Cole, Isabel Barry. I hit send. The silence that followed was deafening. For 2 days, my phone didn't ring. They were in shock. They were waiting for me to crack, to send a follow-up text saying, just kidding, love you guys. But I didn't crack. On the 3rd day, a delivery truck pulled up to my apartment complex. The driver handed me a massive arrangement of white lilies and hydrangeas. It was expensive, easily $200. I pulled the small card from the plastic fork nestled in the greenery. It was Karen's handwriting. Isabel, I'm so sorry if you felt attacked the other night. I was only trying to help, but maybe I went about it the wrong way. We miss you. Let's put this behind us. Love, Karen. I stared at the word if. If you felt attacked. It was the classic non-apology. The coward's way out. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry I reacted. She wasn't taking responsibility for the lie. She was blaming my feelings. I looked at the flowers. They were beautiful. They smelled sweet. I walked to the kitchen, opened the trash can, and shoved the entire vase inside. The glass cracked. The water spilled over the garbage bag. The white lilies lay broken among the coffee grounds and takeout containers. "Not today, Satan," I muttered. That evening, my phone rang again. I checked the screen, ready to ignore it. But it wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Mom. It was Dad's cell number. I hesitated. Dad never called. Mom was the communicator. Dad was the silent figure in the background, the one who nodded and signed the checks. I swiped right. "Hello? Isabel?" His voice sounded older than I remembered. Thin, shaky. "Hi, Dad." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing. "I got your email," he said. "Okay." I braced myself for the lecture. "How could you talk to your brother like that? You need to forgive." "I wanted to tell you." He cleared his throat. "I wanted to tell you that I saw your arm. Really saw it. Last night." "I know, Dad." "No, you don't know," he said, his voice cracking. I looked at it, and I realized that while you were over there getting torn apart, I was here playing golf. And while you were here getting torn apart by your sister-in-law, I was still playing golf. I gripped the phone tighter. My eyes started to sting. "I'm sorry, Izzy," he whispered. "I'm sorry I was a coward. I let them treat you like a spare part because it was easier than confronting Karen. But seeing that scar and hearing about the money," he took a deep breath. "I'm proud of you, not just for the uniform, but for walking out. That took guts, more guts than I've ever had." A tear slipped down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of relief, validation. Finally. "Thank you, Dad," I choked out. "Don't let them back in, Izzy," he said, his voice firming up. "Not until they fix it. Stick to your guns. You're the only one in this family with a spine right now." "I will, Dad." "Good." "And Izzy, if Daniel doesn't pay you, I will. But let's make him sweat a little first." I laughed. It was a wet, shaky sound, but it was real. "Okay, Dad, let's make him sweat." I hung up the phone. The apartment was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I had drawn a line in the sand. I had fired a warning shot. And to my surprise, the one person I thought I had lost was standing right there beside me. I looked at my right hand. It was resting on the counter. It was still trembling, a subtle rhythmic shake. But I didn't try to hide it. I didn't try to stop it. I was ready for the next battle. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. The hangar at Joint Base Andrews was immense, smelling of jet fuel and polished concrete. An American flag the size of a tennis court hung from the rafters. It was promotion day. I stood at the side of the stage, smoothing the front of my service dress uniform with my left hand. My right hand, gloved in white as per protocol, trembled slightly at my side. But today, I didn't try to stop it. In the front row, sitting in the reserved VIP section, was my family. Dad was there, looking dapper in his best suit, clutching a program like it was a holy text. Mom sat beside him, nervously twisting a handkerchief. And then there were Daniel and Karen. They had to come. In the tight-knit social circles of Northern Virginia, skipping your sister-in-law's promotion to full-bird colonel would have been social suicide. Rumors would spread. Why weren't they there? Is there a rift? Karen couldn't handle that kind of scrutiny. So she sat there, rigid in a Chanel suit that cost more than my first car, forcing a smile that looked like it was painted on glass. Daniel sat next to her, looking like a man awaiting a sentencing hearing. "Attention to orders," the adjutant barked into the microphone. The room snapped to attention. 300 airmen, officers, and civilians rose as one. The sound of hundreds of boots hitting the floor simultaneously echoed like a thunderclap. I marched to the center of the stage. Major General Avery Butcher stood waiting for me. She looked magnificent, her stars gleaming under the hangar lights. The President of the United States has reposed special trust and confidence in the patriotism, valor, fidelity, and abilities of Lieutenant Colonel Isabel Berry. The narrator read. Avery stepped forward. She didn't just pin the eagles on my shoulders. She stopped the ceremony. She waved her hand, signaling the narrator to pause. This wasn't scripted. She walked to the podium and lowered the microphone. Before we proceed, Avery said, her voice resonating through the silent hangar, I want to speak about the officer standing before you. She turned and pointed at me. I have heard whispers, Avery continued, her eyes scanning the front row, lingering deliberately on Karen. Whispers about Colonel Berry's injury. Whispers that perhaps she is damaged, that her shaking hand makes her weak. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Let me tell you about that hand, Avery said, her voice dropping to a fierce, quiet intensity. 3 years ago, in a dusty alley in Kandahar, that hand didn't shake. That hand reached into a burning Humvee. That hand grabbed a wounded NCO and dragged him 50 yards under heavy sniper fire. That hand took a 7.62mm round that severed the radial nerve and still refused to let go of her brother in arms. She paused, letting the words sink in. That tremor you see? That is not weakness. That is the receipt of courage. That is the physical manifestation of the oath we all take. I will not leave a fallen comrade. Colonel Berry's hand shakes so that others can stand steady. Tears pricked my eyes. I stared straight ahead, keeping my bearing, but my heart was swelling so big I thought it would burst my ribcage. Sergeant Marquez? Avery called out. From the side of the stage, Marquez hobbled out on his crutches. He wasn't in uniform. He had been medically retired. But he wore a suit, and on his lapel was the Purple Heart pin. He stopped in front of me. He didn't salute with his hand. He simply looked at me and nodded. Ma'am, he said, his voice carrying without a microphone. Thank you. Then, the applause started. It began with Marquez. Then Dad stood up, clapping so hard I thought he'd hurt his hands. Then the generals. Then, the airmen. Within seconds, the entire hangar was on its feet, a standing ovation. It wasn't polite clapping, it was a roar. It was a wave of respect and affection that washed over the stage, drowning out the years of insecurity and shame. I looked down at the front row. Dad was crying openly. Mom was clapping, looking at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. And then there was Karen. She was the only person sitting down. She looked small. Surrounded by heroes, surrounded by people who valued sacrifice over status, her expensive suit and her meticulously highlighted hair looked ridiculous. She looked like a costume jewelry bauble in a vault of diamonds. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her lap, her face burning a deep, humiliated crimson. She realized finally that in the real world, the world of life and death, of honor and duty, her judgments meant absolutely nothing. Her country club membership held no currency here. She was invisible. Beside her, Daniel stood up. He looked down at his wife, huddled in her seat. Then, he looked up at me. For the first time in years, I saw clarity in his eyes. He saw the contrast. He saw the sister who had saved lives and the wife who destroyed reputations. He saw the substance versus the shadow. He started to clap. Slowly at first, then harder. He clapped until his hands were red. He looked at me, and he mouthed the words. I'm sorry. I nodded at him, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. General Butcher stepped back in front of me. She took the silver eagles, the rank of a full bird colonel, and pinned them onto my epaulets. Congratulations, Colonel, she whispered. Thank you, General, I replied, my voice steady. I raised my right hand to salute. It shook. It trembled violently as I brought it to my brow. But nobody looked away. Nobody sneered. 300 people saluted back, honoring the tremor just as much as the rank. I held the salute for a long moment, looking out over the sea of blue uniforms. I had won. Not by fighting Karen on her level, but by rising to mine. The truth had exploded, and in its light, the darkness of my family's dysfunction had nowhere left to hide. 8 months had passed since the promotion ceremony. The seasons had turned, the humid Virginia summer giving way to a crisp, golden autumn that painted the trees in shades of burnt orange and crimson. I sat at my kitchen table on a Saturday morning, a cup of coffee steaming beside me, the ceramic mug warm against the cool granite. In front of me was a lined notebook. I gripped a weighted pen with my left hand, a clumsy, thick instrument designed for occupational therapy, and slowly traced the letters across the page. THEQUICKBROWNFOX. It was tedious work, retraining my brain to write with my non-dominant hand, but I was disciplined. Adaptation is just another word for survival. And I had survived worse than writer's cramp. My laptop pinged, the sound sharp in the quiet apartment. An email notification slid onto the screen. From Karen Barry. Subject, the truth. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the trackpad. For the last 8 months, communication had been sparse. Daniel had set up a payment plan for the $20,000. A check arrived every month like clockwork, accompanied by short, polite texts about the weather or the kids. But Karen had been silent. I clicked open the email. Isabel, I'm writing this because Dr. Evans suggested I put my thoughts into words before asking to see you. I've been in therapy twice a week for the last 6 months. Daniel moved into the guest room after your promotion. He told me he couldn't look at me the same way. He said if I didn't fix myself, he was filing for a trial separation. That woke me up. I'm not writing to make excuses. I'm writing to tell you why I hated you. It wasn't because you were drunk. It was because you mattered. You had a purpose. You saved lives. I have a big house and expensive clothes, but when I look in the mirror, I don't see anything real. I was jealous, ugly, deeply jealous. I tried to tear you down to make myself feel taller. I know I don't deserve your time, but if you're willing, I'd like to buy you a coffee, just to say this to your face. I read it twice. It didn't have the defensive tone of her previous messages. No, if you felt hurt, just a raw admission of envy. I typed a reply with my left hand. Tuesday, 10:16 a.m. The Grind in Old Town. The Grind was a neutral zone. It wasn't the country club, and it wasn't the base. It was just a coffee shop filled with tourists and locals, smelling of roasted beans and cinnamon. I arrived 5 minutes early. Karen was already there. She looked diminished. In a good way. The armor was gone. She wasn't wearing her signature pearls or the heavy contouring makeup that used to mask her expressions. She wore a simple beige sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, but tired, with fine lines around her eyes that she hadn't bothered to hide. When I walked in, she stood up instinctively. She made a small motion, like she wanted to hug me, then caught herself. She saw the wariness in my eyes, the reflex of a soldier assessing a threat, and stopped. Isabel, she said, her voice quiet, barely audible over the hiss of the espresso machine. Karen, I nodded. I didn't offer a hug. I pulled out a chair and sat down. She sat opposite me, her hands wrapped around a mug of herbal tea as if seeking warmth. I noticed she wasn't wearing her massive diamond wedding ring, just a simple gold band. Thank you for coming, she started, looking down at her tea. I didn't think you would. I was curious, I said honestly. Your email was different. It was the truth, she whispered. She looked up, and her eyes were rimmed with red. That day at the ceremony, watching everyone stand up for you, watching Daniel look at you with such pride, it broke me, Izzy. It broke the delusion I was living in. Tears spilled over her lashes. They weren't the pretty, manipulative tears she used to shed to get Daniel to buy her things or get her way with my parents. These were ugly, messy tears of shame. I realized I'm a small person, she choked out, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. I have all this stuff, but I'm empty. And instead of trying to fill myself up with something good, I tried to empty you out. I tried to make your injury, your sacrifice, into something dirty so I wouldn't have to feel inferior. I watched her cry. A year ago, this sight would have given me a savage sense of satisfaction, vindication. But now, sitting here as a colonel, As a woman who had found her tribe with Avery and Marquez, I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a distant, weary pity. She was right. She was small. And I had been letting a small person cast a very long shadow over my life. I reached into my purse and pulled out a tissue packet. I slid it across the wooden table. "Wipe your face, Karen." She took it, dabbing at her eyes, sniffing. "I'm so sorry. About the money, about the rumors, about everything." I took a sip of my black coffee. The caffeine was sharp and grounding. "I accept your apology," I said. Karen's head snapped up, hope flaring in her eyes like a lit match. "You do? Does that mean—" "Stop!" I raised my left hand. "Listen to me clearly." I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "I accept your apology because I don't want to carry the weight of hating you anymore. It's heavy, and I have enough to carry with this arm." I pointed to my right arm, resting on the table. "But acceptance is not restoration," I continued, my voice steady and firm. "Trust is like a mirror, Karen. You didn't just scratch it, you took a hammer to it, you shattered it." Karen flinched, looking down at the table. "We can glue the pieces back together," I said. "We can be civil. I will come to Thanksgiving. I will be an aunt to your children. I will be a sister to Daniel. But the cracks in the mirror will always be there. Every time I look at you, I will see the cracks. I will remember that you were willing to destroy my career to save your ego." "I understand," she whispered. "We are not friends," I said. "We are family. And sometimes that's the best we can do. That is my boundary. Do you accept it?" Karen nodded slowly. She looked sad, but resigned. "I accept it. I'll earn back whatever scraps of trust I can. I promise." "Good." I finished my coffee and stood up. I didn't offer to pay for her tea. I didn't say, "I love you." "I have to get back to the base," I said. "I'll see you at Christmas. Tell Daniel I received the check." "I will," she said. I walked out of the coffee shop into the autumn sunshine. The air was cool and crisp, filling my lungs. I felt lighter. Not happy, exactly, but clear. The war with my family was over. There was no treaty of eternal friendship, no magical erasing of the past. Just a ceasefire. A realistic, enforceable armistice. I looked at my reflection in the shop window as I passed. My uniform was sharp, my posture was straight, and my right hand, hanging by my side, was trembling just a little. I didn't mind the cracks in the mirror. They let the light in. 30 years is a long time. It is long enough for a sapling to become an oak tree. It is long enough for a jagged scar to fade from an angry purple to a soft, silvery white. And it is certainly long enough for a trembling hand to stop being a source of shame and start being a source of history. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom of my house in Alexandria. I was 68 years old now. The blonde bob was gone, replaced by a short, practical cut of steel gray. My face had lines it didn't have before, crow's feet from squinting into the sun on flight lines, brackets around my mouth from barking orders, and, eventually, from laughing. I buttoned the jacket of my service dress uniform. It took me a moment. My right hand still shook. The tremor hadn't gone away. If anything, age had joined forces with the nerve damage to make the rhythm a little more pronounced. But I didn't curse it. I didn't sigh in frustration like I used to in that small apartment in Arlington. I just waited for the tremor to sync with my breathing, and I slipped the button through the hole. I stepped back to look at the reflection. On my shoulders, the insignia caught the morning light. 4 stars. General Isabel Berry. I smiled at the old woman in the glass. "We did good, Izzy," I whispered. "We did good." The retirement ceremony was held on the parade field at Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. It was a perfect Virginia autumn day, the sky a piercing, patriotic blue. The wind whipped the flags, snapping Old Glory back and forth with a sound like applause. I sat on the dais, listening to the Secretary of the Air Force list my deployments, my commands, the policies I had changed to help wounded warriors stay in service. It sounded impressive, but my eyes were fixed on the front row. My parents were gone now, resting side by side in Arlington National Cemetery. But the seats weren't empty. Daniel was there. He was bald now, heavier, moving a little slower due to arthritis. But he sat tall. Beside him was Karen. Karen. The woman who had once been the villain of my story had become something else entirely. Time is a brutal sculptor. It chips away the vanity. After our ceasefire 30 years ago, life had humbled her. Daniel's threat of separation had been real, and she had done the work. For the last 20 years, she had volunteered 3 days a week at the VA hospital, reading to blinded veterans and helping amputees learn to navigate their new kitchens. She wasn't wearing Chanel today. She was wearing a sensible wool coat and comfortable shoes. When our eyes met across the grass, she didn't look away. She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. It was a smile of peace. The mirror we had glued back together still had cracks, yes. But over 3 decades, we had grown vines and flowers over those cracks. We had made it beautiful in a broken kind of way. After the ceremony, during the reception, I felt a tug on my pant leg. I looked down. It was Jack, Daniel's youngest grandson. He was 8 years old, missing a front tooth, and holding my service cap in his hands. "Grandma Izzy?" he asked. Even though I was his great-aunt, I had earned the title. "Hey there, Ace," I said. My knees popped audibly as I knelt down to be eye level with him. The grass was cool under my dress shoes. "Can I wear it?" he asked, holding up the hat with the silver lightning clouds on the bill. "You have to earn it," I teased, but I took the hat and placed it gently on his head. It was massive, sliding down over his ears and covering his eyes. He giggled, pushing it back up. Then he stopped laughing and looked at my hand. It was resting on his small shoulder, vibrating with its constant familiar rhythm. "Grandma," he whispered, looking concerned. "Does your hand shake when you have to shoot the bad guys?" I saw Daniel and Karen freeze nearby, listening. 30 years ago, a comment like that would have started a war. Today, it was just a question from a child. I took Jack's small hand in my trembling one. "It does, Jack," I said softly. "It shakes all the time." "Is it hard?" he asked. "Is it hard to be a soldier if you shake?" I looked at him, then I looked up at the American flag flying over the Potomac River. "Shooting is the easy part, Jack," I told him, smoothing his hair. "The hard part isn't hitting a target. The hard part is standing your ground when everything inside you wants to run away. The hard part is doing the right thing when the people you love tell you it's wrong." I squeezed his shoulder. "This hand shakes because it got hurt saving a friend. It shakes to remind me that I didn't run away. So, no, it's not hard to be a soldier if you shake. It just means you have to be a little bit braver than the people who hold still." Jack nodded, his eyes wide with understanding. "I want to be brave like you." "You will be," I promised. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of violet and burnt orange, I made my exit. I didn't want a long goodbye. I walked to the parking lot where my retirement gift to myself was waiting. It was a 1967 Mustang convertible, cherry red, restored to perfection. It was the kind of car a younger Isabel would have thought was impractical. General Isabel thought it was essential. I threw my bag in the passenger seat and dropped the top. I climbed in, the smell of old leather and gasoline filling my senses. It was the smell of freedom. I fired up the engine. The V8 roared to life, a deep, throaty rumble that vibrated through the chassis. I pulled out of the base, merging onto the highway that would take me west, toward the Blue Ridge Parkway. I wanted to drive into the mountains. I wanted to see the sunset from the peaks. The wind tore at my gray hair. The radio was playing an old classic rock song. I felt the vibration of the steering wheel under my palms. I looked down at my right hand. It was gripping the wheel at the 2 o'clock position. It was trembling, just as it always did. Just as it had at that Thanksgiving table. Just as it had in the desert. Just as it had when I signed the orders that sent men and women into harm's way. It was gnarly. It was scarred. It was imperfect. And it was mine. "Thank you," I whispered to the hand, my voice lost in the wind. "You were the heaviest thing I ever carried, but because of you, I learned how to really live." I shifted gears, pressed the accelerator, and drove straight into the golden fire of the American sunset, finally, completely whole. We often grow up believing that keeping the peace means keeping quiet. We think that if we just swallow the insults and hide our scars, eventually, we will be loved. But my journey taught me a different truth. You cannot build a healthy life on a foundation of disrespect. Setting boundaries is not an act of hate, it is the highest form of self-love. Your shaking hand, whatever your perceived weakness may be, is not something to hide. It is the proof that you survived. Don't wait for someone else to validate your pain. Wear your scars like medals. The moment you stop apologizing for who you are is the moment you truly start to live. Now, I want to turn the microphone over to you. I know many of you listening right now are fighting your own battles in silent dining rooms or lonely apartments. In the comments below, I want you to share one thing, just one thing, that you have overcome that made you stronger today. Let's turn this comment section into a hall of fame for survivors. And if my story gave you even a tiny spark of courage, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's build a community where we don't hide our shaking hands, we raise them high together. I'll see you in the next story.